Thank you, Madam Chairman. At last year's rally, our then chairman, Donald Martin, and I, who unfortunately can't be here today because of ill health, were interviewed by a French lady reporter who kindly sent us a copy of her report. And I have to admit that the title rather shocked me. It read, in French of course, Donald and Edward, 100 years of opposition to the European project. Well, I dated my opposition from learning about the Common Agricultural Policy in the early 70s, when it cut us off from our Commonwealth friends, a deed of infamy at midnight on the 31st of December 1972. Donald is a little older than I, but obviously a lot wiser, because he spotted the European potential for bureaucratic authoritarian tyranny as early as the 50s. So, yes, the lady's arithmetic was correct. Now, looking around this company, even this fairly small company, I can only reflect that represented here are millennia of individual effort, campaigning and striving against this monstrous, malignant cancer on the body politic of the European continent, condemning millions of people, especially in southern Europe, to economic depression and poverty as bad as the 30s, of which our parents and grandparents told us. And for what? For the sake of that paper imperial vanity project, the euro currency, which we escaped by a whisker. Thanks to the late Sir James Goldsmith's referendum party, there had to be a referendum, and the Europhiles jibbed at that, and they wouldn't face powder and shot on that occasion. Or maybe Prudent Gordon did his country one good turn on that occasion. Now, we do have to realise that the European Union really hasn't taken anything from us. Everything we lost has been freely given away by our own governments and parliaments of all political colours. That is, by MPs and by ministers who had given their most solemn oath to uphold the sovereignty of the Crown on behalf of the people against all foreign powers whatsoever. Yet they passed successive enabling act after enabling act, transferring that allegiance and authority over us increasingly to the EU. And whilst we may abhor the EU and all its works, its officials have been relatively straight and honest about its intention, what it says on the tin, ever closer union. And it's our own countrymen who have done this thing by deceit, by subterfuge, by downright lies, and the good-natured, trusting British people, uncomprehending of such a depth of treachery, have let them get away with it until now. And party loyalties have clouded the issue too. In the 70s, Mrs. Thatcher went flitting around the country in a rather pretty dress, decorated with the flags of European nations. Now, my father was a double-dyed-in-the-wool sort of a Tory. We were talking things over at the time of the 1975 referendum. "I don't like this European business," said Dad. "There's something about it that doesn't smell right." And he paused, and then he added, "But that man Wedgwood bends against it, so there must be some good in it." And on such irrelevant perceptions, the result of a referendum may turn if we do not offer a clear, credible, attractive vision of a prosperous, independent future which appeals to people of all sorts across party divides. Now, colleague John Mills of Labour Euro Safeguards campaign can testify to that. He has the scars to show for it. He was national agent for the no side in the 1975 referendum, outspent by the Europhiles by at least 10-1. And the European movement, incidentally, was funded by the American Central Intelligence Agency, and the documents proving it are in Georgetown University. So that honourable defeat against overwhelming odds was hardly surprising. But Mr. Cameron has only promised a referendum because, like Harold Wilson in 1975, he is pretty jolly sure that he can win it. The rules of a referendum are completely different from those of an election, and we have to learn to master them quickly. And within the rules of the EU itself, there are only so many things Mr. Cameron can do in the time limit that he has set himself, so we have a fairly good idea of what is likely. You can be sure that he will, in some way, repeat Harold Wilson's stratagem, claiming to have achieved a fundamental renegotiation and offering us Britain's New Deal in Europe. It will be better presented and more glossy, of course, and it may have a declaration or two to be attached to the treaty, but it will basically be just as fraudulent if it leaves us subject to the rulings of the European Court of Justice. And I think the script for this is probably already written and agreed with Frau Merkel and the Commission, because in 2017, Mr. Cameron, if he's elected, will be in the presidency of the EU. And so he will come back from battling for Britain to show us his new plan. Well, I think we all of us probably have our own different ideas of the sort of future we would eventually like. But now we need to bend our thoughts, will and efforts, not to them so much, as to the practicality of taking the essential first step by winning the referendum, if it comes. Without that, we are stuck. We cannot get past the finishing post without clearing the first hurdle. And even if there's not a referendum, we have to clear that first hurdle by enthusing the majority of the population in our cause. So our own pet schemes of, varied pet schemes of happy and glorious futures may have to take a second place to building a consensus with others. The government knew exactly what it was doing when it took us into the political construct of a single European state or polity. And it did so on the pretext of economic advantage, the common market, which they said was allow us to sell so much more to the other EEC states. But it didn't work. Now, our reasons for wanting to leave are political and constitutional, but our foes still use the economic argument, the supposed advantage of the single market, which they link indissolubly with being a member of the EU. And they say we would lose this if we left the political institution of the EU. That's not necessarily true. But we do need a straightforward, coherent scheme to overcome that fear sufficiently to convince our fellow countrymen and women that those jobs dependent upon trade with the European countries, countries with whom we have no quarrel, are safe and sure, along with the restitution of our sovereignty and independence. If we muff it, the stone rolls back again to the bottom of the hill, and all those millennia of individual effort and striving represented here and in the wider movement, and that represented by our generous benefactors who have gone before us and will not see the day, will have gone for nothing, for at least perhaps another decade. So, ladies and gentlemen, we must get it right. Thank you.